All right. Gary, Simon, Mathonnet. Both your talks were very interesting to me because I felt like you were attacking the angle of growth, but from very different angles. So you talked a lot about structures and strategy and data, and Gary, yours I felt was very sales driven. So I'm going to start off the question, and I'll try to keep it as generic, just so we can touch on those two. What is your best sales or growth story?
You go.
You get them first.
We're on. Now we're on. It was launching the e-commerce company, actually. It was this idea that you could literally put your credit card into Facebook, identify who you thought was the target, create a design, which I think we did on a platform called Canva, some sort of banner. We could write some copy, and within what seemed literally like minutes, there was like statistics, like there was like some sort of engagement. Probably like 20 or 30 minutes, maybe an hour. But for me, coming from a sales background where you've got to build lists and you've got to go to customers and so on, to see this platform that would allow you to like get results like pretty quickly and see people engaging with a creative or a story, allowed us to then experiment. And we had pretty early validation. We had a customer within the first sort of hour, and that $20 that we got for that hoodie was more exciting to me than anything else that we were doing at the time. You know, we had the little Shopify app on our phone, and it makes this noise like the cha-ching for $20. And I remember hearing that noise, and it's like, this is the best thing ever. I just want to hear it more and more and more and more. By the time we were doing like the big numbers, obviously we turned the sound off because it was like the whole day. But like Facebook, the fact that you could make money through advertising on Facebook, like for me, that's like an aeroplane taking off. I still don't really get how the whole thing happens, the magic, but it's amazing.
Thanks. For me, the best sales story is probably how we worked with Nobody Denim, so denim company, to really increase their sales through basically improving their channel mix. And this is the first time where we've been, well, like if you run 3 channels at the same time, right? The point of diminishing return is really far off, because if you have like really a holistic strategy across multiple different channels where you can generate revenue, and you can basically really build those channels around a clear funnel, the total is greater than the sum of the parts, and having that basically flow of messaging around that funnel and touching people, having people, basically what we did is that we thought, all right, how do we get from someone who's never heard about this company, never heard about this product, but would potentially be interested, to they're becoming a brand ambassador, right? How do we get them from point A to point B? And you can't do that with like just running one channel, or just running like one Facebook ad, or just running like one AdWords search ad, right? It just doesn't work. Like you may get them to buy the product once when they search for it, but that's about it. And using everything that the internet allows you to do, which is like a weird sentence to say, but using all those online marketing tools to basically work towards one single goal, and how they all interacted with each other, even though they're so often treated as separate entities, separate channels. Having them all work together in such a meaningful way was really like kind of like a Eureka moment, and that the sales went like completely exponential, like crazy e-commerce sales almost overnight. Just having that funnel really defined with that messaging, and when it just works, like when you find something, you find a potential improvement, it just works, it's like one of the best feelings ever. Did I answer the question?
I think so.
Sorry. Sorry.
What would be your advice for companies starting out for the first time, where they might be experts in their area, but they actually are not experts in business? From what you've learnt on your own journey, what would be the first thing that you advise them to do?
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot. So what I found is that people would get along and often start businesses with people they share very similar characteristics. And when I say characteristics, I'm going to talk about two specific business groups, which is strategic people and creative people, right? So usually when you start a business, so you either, I'm a strategic, I'm not creative, for instance. You want to find what you are, and you want to find a co-founder or someone you can rely on, you can work with, that's on the other end of the spectrum, because those two quality together is really what's going to form a full base to really start a business. And so you often see like, you should find a co-founder if you're starting a startup, et cetera, et cetera. And I would go like that next level, which is find a co-founder that has complementary skills to what you do. I think is the best thing you can do at this stage.
And I would probably definitely agree with that. And I would almost go back a step and ask, why do you want the business? Like, what is the reason behind it? Because I think there is a bit of a fantasy around being a business owner, which is, you see the Facebook ads of these guys who are on the beach and they're running their business, and all this. It's like the same with the Instagram models who between shots, like they're potentially vomiting and like hating their lives, and very stereotypical. But the point is that running a business, if you're starting a business and you've got a family, for example, it's a big risk, right? It's this idea that you probably will have to do late nights. You probably won't make money. Like statistically, you won't make money. And statistically, your first business venture will actually lose you money and fail. Statistically, like you would probably have to do it again and use those lessons. And so the question is not to dissuade you from it, but to sort of ask yourself the questions. And from I was fortunate enough to start when I was young enough to not have a lot of those, I'm going to say liabilities, assets, whichever way you look at it, a lot of the things that cause you to not be able to do those things. But if you genuinely believe in what you're putting out to the market, if you genuinely believe passionately enough that not making money or having sleepless nights or being stressed about revenue or product failing, if these things are like, they're just minor details, it's probably a good idea. If you're doing it just because it's the cool thing, like startups, entrepreneurs, like you should stress test that a little bit more, is what I would say.
So Gary, you're saying those beach shots of your feet with the hashtag blessed isn't real?
I don't do that. I'm not on Instagram or Facebook anymore. I'm taking a break.
Simon, there was something you said which I love, this word. You said Eureka. And I love that word because it's very visceral. What was your Eureka moment? The first time where you said, oh my God, Eureka.
The first ever time, I was probably a bit, it's probably a bit canon, and it may seem even to me now trivial, but after I finished my master's degree, I lived for a while in New York, and I was working with this startup, which was a business network for French CEOs and founders located in the US. So basically it's like a support network with like business perks and that kind of stuff. And basically one thing that I really love about startups is when you start working within a startup, with a startup, you've got instantly, you can take a lot of initiatives. You can go and run with it, and you can take a lot of responsibility straight away. So I was just finishing my degree. I was like fresh graduate. Like I had no idea about practical digital marketing. Just a few consulting gigs here and there, right? And basically they handed me the company credit card and were like, "Hey, there you go and make us some sales on the internet," right? And So I was like, all right. So I Googled a lot. I Googled a lot of things, and I tried to work out what was the best way to attract like this particular demographic, which is very specific, like French-speaking CEOs living in the United States. And it's not the people you can just cold call, like they have no time for you, right? So we found obviously like LinkedIn, but at the time it wasn't obvious because it's not what was taught at university. It's not even what's in most startup marketing guide where they tell you, oh, you need to advertise on Facebook, on Instagram because it's cheap, right? LinkedIn is like very secondary. And having considered that, and I created my LinkedIn profile for the company, and I created this LinkedIn ad, and we had the first members come in, and that was like, wow, this online marketing stuff is really good. And that was probably the first one, yeah.
Fantastic. How about yourself, Gary?
I'm going to take a bit of a detour because there was many Eureka moments, but I actually remember when I was working at Melbourne Airport doing the credit card promotions, I never forget there was all these people that would get off a plane, like one of the Qantas planes, and they were at the front, so they were the first people off, and they were in suits, and they were dressed immaculately, and they were always looking unhappy. They always had a long face, and they looked like they just didn't look good. And about a year later, I travelled with my family to Cuba, which I was fortunate enough to do. And for those that don't know, Cuba, being a socialist country, communist country, where everyone gets paid the same by the government, they're on very low income, $50 a month, $100 a month. They had food rations, so they take those cards to the store, and the government pays for the dental, and no one really owns their own business. And I remember being there, and like everyone was happy. It's like 11:30 at night, and people are in the streets, literally in the streets, like smoking cigars, playing chess, dancing. I went to a nightclub there, and it was the worst experience ever, because the guys are like these incredible salsa dancers, and the girls are these incredible salsa dancers. I can't dance salsa, and it's like you just can't. It's like you're starstruck. But I remember that feeling, which was that was Eureka for me. It's like it doesn't matter how much money you have or success or anything else. These guys have nothing, but they actually have everything. And I think, like when I think about that, applying that to today, I think there's far too much focus on the materialism and success, like with cryptocurrency and Lamborghinis and all this rubbish that doesn't really enrich you in any way. And there's probably not enough focus on, on like the people that have the least end up being sort of the happiest. And I think taking that into business is a good trait to have.
Gary, you just went very deep.
Sorry.
Oh, you did go very deep. On the flip side of Kim's question, what are some of the mistakes that you've made on your journey that has been a moment that you've actually really learnt a valuable lesson that you've carried through you up until this day?
I would say the tendency is to be a little bit more philosophical, but the two mistakes. One is it's a lesson, and I know this is going to sound very cliched, but you'll speak to mentors and you'll speak to advisors that will tell you, don't make this mistake. I did it. Try this. And I think really fundamentally, like if you don't do the mistake, like viscerally, you don't feel that that stress or that. Like you don't get it. It's just like it's a book that says this. But so I think the biggest mistake is to try and avoid the mistakes, as cliched as that sounds. Like screw it up, lose some money, stuff it up, let the business fail. You'll never ever learn a lesson like that. And I think the other mistake is this idea of work-life balance. And I say that that's a mistake because I know there's a stream of thought which says work as hard as you can and discredit your life to sort of get somewhere. And when I was doing the door-to-door stuff, I was working 14 hours a day, didn't have a social life. And I actually think this idea of work-life like blend, which I've heard coined now, is, like if you don't actually like the 9 to 5, so much so that you want to spend that time doing it, then it's not like having it work and then going home and enjoying the home. It's really got to be all. Like you enjoy the lunches you do during work, you enjoy the work. So it's all good in terms of, and I think that the mistake of choosing one to benefit the other later is something that I did for about 5-6 years. I'm never going to get that time back. Sorry, I know, deep again.
It's very hard to go after that. I'm going to talk more about like another type of what I feel is mistake is pursuing something you don't believe in because of like peer pressure or like, you know, the way that things are supposed to be done. So for me coming into Australia, I found it a very, very progressive country when it comes to like business, when it comes to everything related to companies, etc. Because in France, education and business is very much of a closed model. We have a startup ecosystem, but it's very small and very weak. And basically, the standard model is, you know, you go to school and you need to have a master's degree because everyone's got a master's degree, and if you don't have one, then you won't get a job, and then you need to take on a junior role at a junior company, and then you need to take an internship before, and you need to do this and you need to do that. And it's basically like this whole path is just laid out for you to follow, and basically, I really hated that model, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, and I'm not in France. But I wasted years of my life actually trying to just, you know, do what people were expecting me to do because I was in that model, I was in that situation, and yeah, that's the kind of thing that was a mistake, and I realized that the lesson learned was that I needed to get away from that. I needed to go into a context that was more fitting to what I was looking to do, and that wasn't going to judge me if I dropped out of uni or if I was, you know, pursuing like crazy online marketing. My parents have no idea what I'm doing. They don't understand digital and stuff like that kind of stuff. So, yes, I hope that answers the question.
I'm just going to check in with the audience really quickly. Does anyone in the audience have a question for any of our speakers? Yes, James, we have this gentleman here.
So, question, does SEO work when you've got a small number of visitors to your site? I've only got like 250, 300 a month at the moment. Is SEO even worth it at that point, or is that a difficult point from getting from there to the critical mass for that to actually work? And what would your best advice be on how to choose a digital marketing agency?
I'll answer first. Yeah. Okay. SEO is not about the current numbers; it's about the potential numbers. So if you're evolving a market where, for instance, there's like a real opportunity in terms of like people searching in that market, being active on search engine, and that you feel like by putting an amount of effort that your budget allows, you can get there, or you can employ someone to get there. It's more about the opportunity and the potential than the current situation. So if you're in a field where you know a lot of your customers are on Google, and as Gary was suggesting, looking on the keyword planner on Google if anyone's looking for your product, and you feel like there's a real opportunity, then yes, maybe that's a great area for you, but it's not instant. So it's going to take some time. So it also depends on your business objective, right? If you have like a 3 months constraint when you need to get revenue to a certain level and certain point, then maybe you're not going to look at that because it's more of a long-term initiative. As for picking agencies, what I would do is I would actually try to, and I know that's difficult because you would be having to invest a bit of time, but I would try to educate myself on the topic before like having a chat with a marketing agency and just trying to learn a bit of SEO yourself, maybe do it a bit yourself and allocate a bit of time to that. Because right now the market is in a state where it's very complicated if you don't have any knowledge to differentiate between just a cowboy that would try to screw you over, or like someone who's trying to do the right thing by you. And that education layer is what it's going to allow you to make like a better decision. What I would recommend when looking at different agencies is, and I would do as many meetings as I can. Like I would speak to all the marketing agencies that I can, right? And I would take all that information into account using my education on the topic and making that decision that way. Yeah.
I would only add one thing to choosing an agency. And that is generally the businesses that are run by the vertically integrated businesses that run purely online. So let's say like a Kogan or a Founder magazine or these sorts of guys. The founders are usually very technically savvy themselves, and as such, any recommendation they would make or the companies that they would use, if they're not doing it internally, are usually a good bet, because you could generally leapfrog off their decision-making process, because they would definitely not be hiring somebody who was a cowboy, and they would see the failure in results instantly. So to bypass that, if you've said, here are the top 10 companies, and it's not companies that are offline that now have an online store, because they may use agencies that don't get them results. It's ones that are pure play online, like Skinny Me Tea, like these sorts of guys. They know their stuff, and they're the ones who, if they have an agency or a contractor or a freelancer, have picked somebody because they're very, very good.
Great. Any more questions from the audience? Yes, we have a gentleman in the center.
Thank you. Gary and Simon, very, very much enjoyed that topic. I guess I'm quite interested in the hacking part of the growth hacking equation. And Simon, you talked about an analogy of having a sample size within the digital agency where you put more effort in and you were able to determine that they were more longer-term customers. Given also that you put a slide that showed how the linear analytics model kind of leapfrogs off the scientific method in terms of iteratively improving. Given a lot of small startups, surely we want to kind of leapfrog off our peers' successes and failures. So, retrospectively, if you can do that again, do you see an avenue where you could get that data from some other mechanism, or do you think the cost of that approach is still valid?
You mean in terms of collecting the data to...
Yeah, so if you don't have the user base to justify that kind of decision making, to get the kind of sample size, how would you get that data now?
Well, you've got to... Basically, it's all about being creative about getting the data. And for instance, if you're trying to get demographics data, like Facebook is really cheap, so this is where you can get like a lot of data regarding customer profiles. Like that's a good area where you can, for like a really limited budget, you can get a lot of data. And I would try to also, as you said, like piggyback off other comparable businesses, even though they don't necessarily, like you're in a bit of a tough situation if you don't have like a really small budget allocated to collecting data, or if you just don't have a data sample and you just have, like let's say you just have a product and you don't know what to do with it, right? And the first point, like the first thing I would think about is, how do I get my product out there, like maximum with the minimum budget? That could be like just going to events and presenting your project, like signing up for free pitches night and getting that feedback from users. Like I would try to find creative ways around how do I get qualitative data around what I do without spending money and without investing in any kind of database acquisition. I would read, I would try to compare to other businesses, I would try to get like qualitative data, even if it's anecdotal. Anecdotal is better than nothing. Surely it's not great, but it's better than nothing. Asking your peers, asking anyone. There's a lot about this myth of like, you know, people are gonna steal my idea if I talk about it too much or like something like that. I don't think it's true. I don't think like if you're really confident in your product that is meeting the needs, if you've got the passion about it, it's very unlikely that someone that you're just gonna talk about your products too is going to take that idea and run away. So I would try to like really get even that anecdotal feedback or that anecdotal data as much as I can, any way that I can. But yes, it requires like, you've got those little areas. Social media is pretty cheap. If you want to get like a lot of data, it's pretty cool. You've got a lot of information online about market research, et cetera, that you can also use. And yeah, I would recommend if you can't get that qualified data that you pay for, try to get free anecdotal data any way that you can, like in person, will probably be my next pointer. But it's very difficult question.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add something to that. Something that we try and do to shortcut the process, and I don't know if this is we're on camera, but I'll say it anyway. If I find that we've got a product and we don't have the data to support how to market it yet, and assuming that we don't have the budgets, we will usually do two things. The first thing is we will use a platform like SEMrush, which will give us some competitor analysis on what they're spending their ads on, and usually for how long. So if I can see that the company that's in my segment is the biggest spender and they've been doing it for a year or even 4 months, like no one spends for 4 months without a result, right? So if they're still spending after 3 or 4 months, it's getting them some result. And then I'll go on like Upwork and I'll ask a freelancer to basically copy their website, like literally copy it. Exactly identical. If it's identical, it converts the same, right, in my view. And then just change the logo. And then I say, well, that's my base. That's like my starting point. I'm going to run the exact same ads to the exact same website. And if that doesn't work, then I don't know what's going on. But usually 8 or 9 times out of 10, you get some information and you've de-risked that process because like they're doing something that's working. And that's usually like one of the secrets in how we start little businesses is we'll just clone, copy, and then adjust and scale.
Awesome, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
So when you start your startup and create your own website, so one of the biggest problems is how to create recognition of these websites in Google. So do you have any tips?
Hi. So especially when you're starting a new website, it's usually tricky because how does Google find your website, right? It's no one links to it. It just is here, but how does Google find it? So what I recommend is using a tool called Google Search Console, which basically allows you to verify the ownership of a specific domain and specific website with Google. And there's a little tab in there, if my memory is correct, under a crawl and fetches Google, which basically allows you to submit your website to the Googlebot and manually submit it to the index so that Google knows it exists and actually files it through its index. So you can use this tool to just tell Google, my website exists, it is here, and please crawl it and please have a look. Especially if you're starting out and your website's linked from nowhere, it's great. Otherwise, what I will also recommend it is you can create the Facebook page of your website. You can create business listings on your website. You just type like business listings Melbourne, and you list your website on all those different business listings website, which is another way because Google crawls those websites. So if they see the link, they will find you as well. So it's a good way like to get initially discovered. Nothing to add. Cool.
Any further questions from the audience? Okay. I'll kick off with a question. What is, in your experience, the biggest mistake you've seen a website or a company, can be yours, make? And Simon, I know in your example you showed a website with 50 different...
Yeah, links got a good one. Do you have,
Sure.
I'll think about it.
I'm gonna, like with fear of sounding very self-serving here, I still think the biggest mistake that any website makes, especially when they're a website that is not a good website, is to not have chat. And I'm not talking about using our company, I'm talking like do it yourself. But I think that if you have a website and you want to understand what's going on that website, what the messaging should be, why people don't click through things, when you have a chat there, and there's free chat, there's like Talk2, which is a free chat platform, it doesn't cost you anything. You have the app on your phone. People will naturally go to chat and not do anything else if there's chat. Like that's typically what happens. If it pops up, they will have a conversation. And usually you can get a pretty good gauge of the demographic. A lot of these people that come to the site have poor grammar, maybe don't speak English, maybe from a different country, maybe you're looking for a completely different offering. And that's like the best intel you can get, I think. And I think that everyone that with a website should have that as the first thing as they start to get traffic. When it gets very busy, like you can resource it up, but I think that is the cheapest, easiest way to get intel on why your website isn't working, personally.
I would add that even though most websites now have Google Analytics tracking, one of the big mistakes that I see is that people don't have goal tracking, which is basically tracking the conversion events on their website. And basically, without that, without the end goal, because this is going to be related to your overall goal, right? Without that tracking, without that info, it's basically all the rest is kind of worthless. And tracking those conversion events, those people like really engaging you with your website is how you extract a lot of insights. So not only look into setting up Google Analytics for your website, goal tracking is super important. Number one mistake that I see when we have a new clients come on board is yes, they have Google Analytics, is great, but they have absolutely no goal tracking, and therefore we have very little data to base our strategy decisions on.
That's good.
Let's talk about educating ourselves a bit more deeply on these issues. I mean, Gary, earlier on you mentioned how Peter Alexander came to your school and he basically said, oh, you know, you don't need to really educate yourself. Look how rich I am. But in terms of the value of education to be able to create a website that's effective, what would you both say in terms of where are the good resources to go to educate yourself well to make sure that you are creating a product that is going to be worthwhile out in the market?
The internet, no. You know,
Don't say Google.
I would actually early in my career, I used to Google like a lot, like crazy, like questions, try to find resource, go off link and another. And what I would do is I would actually try to build like a database of the articles and the resources that I found the most impactful, because you're going to read a lot of stuff while doing like, I don't know, market research or trying to find data about a specific market. You're going to read lots of articles and lots of articles, and I'm telling you, you're not going to remember any of it unless you actually build like a strong database with key insights of exactly what you want to do. And you've got cool things now like Evernote and like those kinds of software which allow you to like really build like a feed of either those blogs and those resources that you found or those specific articles. And I found that I needed to at least like really to absorb like a really impactful piece of information, read at least 2 or 3 times the same articles to really absorb it and really take that into account.
It's actually really hard, I think, because like what Simon said, it's a challenge because there's so much crap out there that if you don't know what you don't know, anything you read might be, you know, like you can read about the keto diet, you can read about, you know, the paleo, like everything is an expert on everything. So how do you know what's really the expert? And I would say, usually, like for me, I've found a low risk place to start, particularly for marketing and business, in fact, most topics, is HubSpot, funnily enough. So HubSpot, which is a marketing platform, put out insane amounts of content on, I think, like everything in the world of the internet. And whilst they're not like the number one expert on, like you wouldn't, if you were an SEO expert, you wouldn't go there to learn about SEO. You'd go to like Search Engine Land or something else. But as somebody starting, they usually put it in quite basic terms. And they're fairly well trusted. I mean, I learn things about sales from HubSpot's marketing. So I think that it's usually a good place to start to learn. Other than that, I think you then need to sort of, like what Simon said, you sort of need to know the resources that become the expert resources, and then you keep going to them. You could go to Google and type, top 10 trusted blogs for landing page conversion, and like Unbounce will come out with will be one. Or, that's usually how you would find that, I would say.
And we have time for one more question from the audience before we wrap up. Is there anyone with a burning question? Maybe burning. I have one. Knowing everything that you know now and every lesson that you've learned, if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing, what would it be?
Start Google in 2000. That's a great business model. I actually think we live in a really good time now. I think, when I think about our parents and our grandparents' generation, starting a business was a really hard thing to do. Now everybody can basically do it. And I think the internet has allowed us the ability to access information like never before. And so I think for those that are interested in that, there really is no time but now. It's funny. If I wanted to hire an Instagram expert, a Snapchat expert, I couldn't hire a 45-year-old Snapchat expert because they're probably not going to be experts. Because what the hell are they doing on Snapchat anyway? I need like a 16-year-old. And when in the world was the 16-year-old an expert at anything, right? But we live in that age where we will actually hire a 16-year-old to tell us about that, or a 24-year-old to teach us about Twitter marketing, or it's a really interesting world, and I think that you can be an expert in anything now and leapfrog years of MBAs and masters and anything else. So there's no real point in waiting about it. Just sort of jump in, and that's what I'll be telling myself.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think one of the things I would go back and tell myself earlier is start exploring other things. Start looking at other things. Don't just rely on what the education gives you and what you're just fed. But just if you're obsessed about something, it's never gonna feel like work. And you can at that age, I definitely agree. Right now, you can become. You've got the resources out there to become an expert in anything that you want. So if you want to become an expert in anything, just go ahead and do it and learn about it. And you've got all the resources. Yeah, I think this is what I would do.
Beautiful. Simon, Gary, Serpil, thank you so much for joining me in the Q&A. If everyone can join me in thanking our speakers.